Hi, Phil from Bright Fox Development. In my previous video, we talked about the things that go into creating a silo mindset within your organisation, and I presented you with a cycle of poor performance. The poor performance cycle started with a challenge, and if you challenge poorly, what individuals look for are the dependencies around them that mean they can't do their job. And those dependencies lead to blame, because if someone else is dependent on some other team to create part of their job for them, blame is an easy out when it comes to poor performance. What blame does is it generates that silo mindset, the circling of the wagons. We're in this together against everyone else. The worst part about that is it's not just the team that are challenged, it's the team on the outside that will start to circle their wagons, and you end up with silos forming within your organisation. The biggest challenge you face here is poor performance becomes endemic, and it becomes much harder to break that cycle. I want to talk to you today about how you might reframe the challenge so that you don't trigger immediately the dependencies which lead to blame. We talked last time about how challenge is very much directed at the individual, targeted. I need you to improve your performance. Why has your performance slipped? We're struggling to make our targets. My boss is pressuring me to improve. The numbers have been dropping. All of these are phrases that we associate with challenging poor performance. They all involve an element of passing the buck. It's not me, it's you, is the essence of most of what we're saying. Some of them even allow an individual to look around and go, well, it's okay to make an excuse because my team leader, my manager has been making excuses. And most of these statements have an implicit level of blame about them. It's your fault. You haven't been. Why aren't you improving your performance? And these are phrases we hear commonly within the kind of performance conversation. When I get asked to talk about difficult and challenging conversations, these are the conversations people ask me about. They're challenging because of what you're phrasing and how you're phrasing them. They don't need to carry the same weight of challenge you feel they do. When we want to reframe how we challenge individuals, there's 3 steps that I would want you to consider. Step 1 is understanding, step 2 is acknowledge, and step 3 is action. So understand, acknowledge, and action. When we have a performance issue, the first thing we really should be trying to do is understand the causes of that performance issue. The causes are almost certainly not a person, unless that person has constantly been underperforming, in which case you should have dealt with that in the probationary period and not let them through into the organisation. Let's assume the team has performed well in the past and we're seeing a change in behaviour to poor performance. The easy and obvious thing to say is, you're underperforming, improve your performance. There might be a carrot there as well. Performance related pay. Actually, if your numbers go up, you're going to get your bonus. However, it's still not understanding why performance has slipped. So the first thing to do is understand why performance is down. What elements are contributing to the unexpected behaviour? And that unexpected behaviour in this instance is poor performance. Our team have performed well in the past, they're not now. And can we get to a point where the behaviour they're demonstrating is actually what we expect? What I mean by that is, when we look at the environment around those individuals, can we get to a point where the behaviour they're demonstrating, the poor performance they're demonstrating, is actually perfectly understandable? Because then we can look to solve problems. First, there's a few things to look at. What are our measures in place to understand poor performance? The number of times people tell me that people are underperforming and can't produce anything to demonstrate that other than a gut feeling or they were better last week. Without measures in place, you actually can't genuinely have these conversations anyway. So what are our measures in place to understand poor performance? If you tell me customer service is poor within your organisation, what facts do you have to support that? Once you understand those measures, what factors can affect those measures? This is partly looking at those dependencies within organisations, but it's also looking at everything around a team or around an individual that could affect those performance measures. And there's a few areas to look at. You and the role modelling behaviours that you're demonstrating. When things get difficult, do you walk the walk, or do you step away and allow that person to struggle? Do you step in when someone's off sick? Do you step in when someone's struggling? Do you take action? Do you become part of the team for that brief period of time? That ability to role model what's right is in your hands and is incredibly powerful. The peer group around an individual. What kind of culture has the team generated over time? Is there a culture of when the boss isn't looking, we don't need to perform? Is there a culture? And it could come back to that blame of, actually, it's not our fault, so we don't have to perform, and that will need digging into. That's that dependencies piece. Is it there's been a policy or procedural change recently and people are still learning the skills to allow them to demonstrate high performance? Or is it just a culture of excuses? So there's some things for you to consider and look at. Policy and process can be really impactful, and you should write policy and process with the behaviours you want to see in place, not necessarily with a direct performance measure in place. What you're looking for when you look at all of these things is anything that's incongruent with behaviours you expect to see. This does take a little bit of time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it is something that when you do notice underperformance, you should be really starting to focus in on these areas. Think about what's demonstrated on a daily basis. Think about the impact of everything around an individual and what's incongruent with what you want to see. Once you've completed that, it's time to acknowledge what you've found. This is the final test before you start to put actions into place. It's the opportunity for you to validate what you've found with your team. This is what I've seen happen. This is what I think is happening. Is it what you're experiencing? Now, there are different ways of going about that. You might want to invite somebody else in to have that conversation with your team because it might be challenging for them to have that conversation with you. You might want to run a survey. You might just want to sit down in a team meeting and have a chat about what you've discovered. But you need to involve them and you need to validate those findings because that can deepen your understanding from the previous step. Once you've acknowledged your findings, it's for you to put them right. No one else is going to do this for you. You need to take ownership, role model that ownership type behaviour, and start to look at how you're going to correct some of the problems you found in the understanding step. And you will need to look at the dependencies and form partnerships there with individuals who can help you influence outside of your team and with those teams that have dependencies with you. This is your opportunity to start to put together an action plan that will deliver the behaviours you need to see. That action plan can once again be validated with your team. And once you've got the plan in place, you can engage leaders across the business to support your plan and to help you implement that plan as smoothly as possible. Don't forget that plan might require changes to policy, changes to process, changes to personnel maybe. So you're going to need some support. Find the right support, share your plan, make it public. And then it's simple. It's the opportunity for you to enact that plan, to put it into place, take it one step at a time. And once you see an expected change, move to the next step. Sounds really simple, but there's a few key things to remember. When we focus on something, we're likely to see a brief improvement. It's a classic within a customer service training environment. I've trained my team to improve their customer service, and for 4 weeks, 2 months, you see an improvement in customer service. But because you've not looked at everything else that's impacting, behaviours go back to normal. And normal being the thing that you were trying to understand in the understanding step. To ensure lasting impact, do not implement too many changes too quickly. Allow a change to bed in. Ensure for yourself that behavioural change is a lasting and impactful behavioural change and not merely a blip because you've put focus on that particular area. To recap, we need to improve the way we challenge when we're having conversations about underperformance. We need to have some clarity about what that underperformance is and how we've measured it. We then need to understand where the poor performance comes from. And that's our first step in producing a better challenge. We need to understand. Once we understand, it's an opportunity to acknowledge what we know with our team, to improve our understanding maybe further, and to help us start to build an action plan. Once we've got that action plan in place, this isn't an overnight change. This is lasting change for impactful performance within your teams. To create lasting change, one change at a time, wait for it to bed in. Don't allow that focus to provide a temporary blip that actually you're going to see go revert later on. So if you want to produce better challenge, if you want to start to take away silos within your business, next time you've got a performance challenge, take my 3 simple steps to producing a better challenge. Understand, acknowledge your understanding with your team and others, and build an action plan that changes over time, not changes overnight. In the next video, we'll be talking about how we improve or how we understand dependencies better and how we can start to break down some of those dependencies, or when we can't break them down, we change them from dependencies to partnerships. Thanks for listening. I'm Phil. See you on the next one.